Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, I'm writing a book right now. And so I've had to reflect on this question of like, what was that seed that was planted early on? Like, was there a seed? What was it? Because I've been really deliberate about like the different moves I've made in my career, but I kind of had to look back and think, so before that, right? Before school, before everything, like what was that seed that was planted? And I think what I realized is that, I grew up with like a single mother who, worked like three jobs, was never really able to be there and be around for my brother and I. And so obviously as a little girl, you kind of want to figure out like, why is that, right? And so I also noticed as I got older that, you know, a lot of people's life was that way, whether they had to have three jobs or they just worked one and they worked a ton. Like a lot of people spend majority of their work or their life at work. And also a lot of people don't love what they do. And so looking back on that, I think I've always wanted to solve that equation or that question of like, if we have to work, if we have to spend so much time at work, like let's at least like not have it suck our souls at a minimum. And then if we can go beyond that and actually make it enrich our lives, that's going to be amazing. And so I think that's kind of been the common thread throughout my career of let's find a way so that I not only love what I do every day, but it would be amazing if I could also make it so that my work makes work better for other people. And so I say that because my work has been primarily in the large consulting firms, a lot of management consulting, work around people, culture, change management, leadership development, all those types of things and the different levers that we see on an organizational level that can actually make or break the experience of people's work in their day-to-day lives. And then I've also had my own executive coaching practice. I've also been a senior leader in a large global multinational. And I worked for startups. I started my own firm a couple years ago. So I kind of have these different experiences trying to pick up what I call the pieces of all the puzzle essentially that can kind of work together when it's like kind of like in a system essentially. And so I'll pause there, but that's kind of how I see my career is like it's been that journey of picking up all those pieces to see how everything works together so that we can basically make work better for people. I essentially always thought I'd be an attorney, didn't get into law school, and I kind of thought at that point in time, let's maybe reassess and pivot, but I had no idea what I would do. And so I basically spent a couple months, at I think it was the summer before my last year of college, somewhere around there. And I basically kind of did some soul searching and took assessments and went to the library and just was like, what do I gravitate towards? What comes naturally? Like, what's a strength? Like all those kinds of questions that people can take. And I realized that psychology was something that intuitively came to me, number one, just because my childhood, I kind of had to learn how to navigate things, but also it was just interesting to me. All the stuff I gravitated towards was understanding people and learning how to help them and make life better for them. And so I knew that going into it. So there's that piece, but then it's coupled with, I also knew I didn't want to be a therapist because one of the things I did during my research is I kind of tried to understand like, what does a psychologist do? What does a therapist do? And I just realized that it wasn't the best fit for me. But essentially, I just realized being a therapist was not the right fit. So I thought, I wonder how I could marry business and psychology so it's not the exact same dynamic that I'd experienced on, being a therapist, but I could still employ all the wonderful principles of psychology to actually make people's life better at work. And so that's kind of when that culmination happened of all those different forces all at once and helped me realize, okay, this is a great intersection between business and psychology. Oh, yes. Because not only have I been a woman working in a male dominated space, but for over 10 years, I've also lived and worked in New York City, which is, pre-pandemic, we'll just say what it is. It's been a very much a culture of that. I mean, there's tons of amazing women that are leaders and it's very progressive in some ways, but at least in the industries that I was in and the kinds of organizations I was working for, there, you definitely got a flavor of that, the men are at the top and there's still people that still buy into some of that old school thinking, and so I've definitely experienced it. But I think part of what helped me is that when I was young I was a tomboy. I had a brother and I had a lot of male friends, so that really gave me a lot of insight, I think, into how men think and guys think, as well as how I could employ some of those principles as well. And so when I was at PwC specifically, that was around the time that Lean In came out. And so I was one of the co-founders of Lean In circles there. And it was an amazing experience because there were so many women that were like, didn't know how to ask for promotion, or were kind of having the same issues of not knowing how to speak up, or they were being mansplained, or all the different things that happen to women in these situations. And we got to come together and we did use Sheryl Sandberg's course materials as kind of like a foundation for the first few sessions. But after a while, it just became this really cool organic thing where we would have everybody come in together. They kind of share it wasn't like a complaining session. It was more like, hey, here's the thing, the challenge I'm trying to work on, whether it was a self challenge or an environmental challenge in the workplace. How would you guys do that? Or how have you navigated that before? It was a really great kind of peer-to-peer coaching network. And the interesting part that we realized after, a few sessions was that this was not just a women versus a man thing. This was more like a, for better or worse, anyone who's not a older white cisgender male basically benefited. So we started to have all kinds of folks, men, women, allies, gender diversity, racial diversity, ethnic, like all the different things, the neurodiversity, all kinds of diversity. We just realized that it was more of a diversity in general issue versus a women's empowerment issue. And so that really, I think, bred a fruitful discussion and lots of interesting solutioning and coaching and that type of thing. So I think finding a network, whether it's women only, or it's better if it's more than women, if it's really diverse, that's even better. But kind of having that support network is really helpful. There's a lot of great books and resources and podcasts out there. I've done a ton of that, and that's been really helpful for me. The other part I see a lot of with women, and maybe men too, it's probably not just a female thing, but I think I see it more with women, is that they might read all the books they can on the topic and they learn all the information and they're like, oh, this is great. But a lot of times I find that they still come to me and they say, I don't know how to put it into practice. And what the issue ends up being almost every time is that either they have imposter syndrome, so they know what to do, but they don't feel like they can do it, or it's more like a self-worth issue. It's like, who am I to do that? Or what will people think? And I think if I was to give any advice to anyone, man or woman in this regard, anything that you're trying to implement, new identity in that regard, new ways of working, new ways of behaving, whatever that might be, you have to really focus, first of all, I think, on that identity piece and the energy piece, and kind of like asking yourself, who do I need to be and how do I need to show up every day to have the life I want, or to be that person, or to demonstrate that? You have to do that inner work first. So I know that was a really long answer, but I think that those are some of the tools that I've learned over the years. I think if I was to put my finger on it, it again stems back to my childhood. And that's why I always tell people to make sure you're doing that inner work as a foundation of anything out here at work or anything in your life you want to do. You have to know who you are. You have to know what your wounds are. You have to know what your shadow is. You have to know literally like who you are. That's the most important thing. And so to answer your question, I think for me, just candidly, a lot of the change maker in me came from when I was young. I mean, in my household, it was very much, there was a lot of talking about doing things, but there was not a lot of change happening. And so for me, I just got really frustrated with that. And I'm like, okay, this, talk is cheap kind of a thing. And so I think without realizing it, I didn't grow up thinking, ooh, I'm going to change everything. But now I look back and like, that's where it started. I was just like, I was sick of things not changing when they should change. And so I think subconsciously, I just learned that, okay, first of all, if you want to be a change maker, you have to know yourself. Then you have to know how to change yourself, because you can't control other people. So what you can control is how you react to things, how you frame things, how you think about things, and like how you do things differently going forward. And so I think that's where it stemmed. And I found it to be really helpful to always start with yourself and then see what else you can change in the environment. I don't know if I could pick one, because what I think is, as you learn, what I would say is this, maybe this is a good meta answer for you. So I think that whether it's business, life, whatever, everything we go through, everything we learn, everything we experience, good and bad, especially bad, but good as well, I think you need to think of it as a lesson. Like you need to think of it as a lesson, because then it's like, number one, it has meaning to you. You can learn from it, and you can either, learn and not do it again, make that mistake again, or kind of have that situation happen again. But you also kind of have grace in the sense of it. You don't turn into a victim, like, oh, this happened to me. Oh, I got fired, or, oh, this person took advantage of me. If you see the lesson in it and you see how you can do it differently next time, you won't do it next. It won't happen again, usually, because you're aware of it. And you can also share that lesson with other people. So I think that really just thinking of all these experiences, I think of life as like a classroom, kind of as an experiment. We're always learning, testing, collecting data points, as I call it. So I think if you can always do that, then everything's going to make you better, whether it's a positive or a negative in the moment, it's all going to make you better going forward. what I would say is I've learned this with starting my own company as well as writing this book right now. I think that these are two activities that there's other activities that do this, but these two specific activities, I think, will really test you. They will get you to your core because for various reasons, and it's hard to explain until you go through it. There's just a lot of different things, and the things are going to be different for each person. But in the process of starting your own company or writing a book or something along these lines, there's a lot of things that pop up that you maybe don't expect, and they will test your psychology. They will test how you react. They will test your confidence big time. They will test your trust in other people. They will test your trust in yourself. They'll test like your mental model of the world. And it's not a bad thing. It's always good to be testing these things, but it's a really amazing learning experience. So I think for me, that's been like the biggest lesson that I've learned is just like, whoa, I feel like I'm so much deeper as a person and I understand so many other people's experiences more by doing this. And so again, I think that goes back to being curious about other people and using life as a lesson. Yeah, well, I would say it's probably every industry. The good thing about my work is that it's in high demand. So it's everything as far as like change and transformation work that happens in companies, which is everything all the time, right? Digital transformation, reorgs, mergers, like all the different things. And then my work is also at the intersection of that. And it's also at the intersection of like culture, employee experience, org design, org effectiveness, leadership, all that. And so I say that because right now, I think we all know the biggest hurdle is even pre-pandemic, we all knew work was broken for most people. Like it wasn't great. Like for various reasons, cultures weren't always great, and this wasn't great, and there was like inclusion, belonging, diversity. Like there's all kinds of problems pre-pandemic, but now there are so many areas for opportunity. And so for me, it's an amazing time because everything I do is just so needed, and it can all make such a positive impact. So I think it's like the great resignation, right? There's a disconnect between leaders and their people, big disconnect. There's the hybrid remote working piece. There's toxic cultures. There's quiet quitting. There's the newest thing they're calling like the breakup, which is like the fact that we're losing tons of senior women that we work so hard to get into senior roles to kind of close that diversity gap or the gender gap. It's going back in time now. And guess what? Like I think Future Forum found that like only like 61% of women now want to work predominantly remotely, right? So it's an easy fix. Give them more flexibility. Don't demand they come into the office. So these are easy fixes. They don't even cost any more money, but there's a short-sighted mindset with some organizations where they're not allowing that or they're not looking positively upon it. And so these women are like, I'm out, peace. And so this actually kind of gets at my book. My book is basically like going to be talking about this and many other things like this, where it's like very easy, cheap / no cost ways that organizations can really move the needle to attract, retain, and unlock the best of talent, but they're not seeing it or they're not doing it because of maybe ego. I don't know why they're not doing it, but these are really easy, simple fixes, and it would make everything better for everybody. So those are just some of the things that I'm seeing right now.